My beloved child. There is something that no one around you can fully understand yet. While you were busy wondering why the silence became so heavy, why certain conversations suddenly stopped, and why your heart kept asking questions without finding answers, another story was unfolding where your eyes could not reach. The person who once tried to appear strong in front of everyone reached a moment where that strength completely disappeared. It did not happen in a hidden place. It happened where they never imagined their emotions would be seen. Right in front of their neighbors, the walls they had built around their heart finally collapsed. The expressions they had hidden for so long could no longer stay inside. The people standing nearby noticed that something was terribly different. They saw eyes filled with regret instead of confidence. They saw silence replacing excuses. They saw someone trying to explain feelings that words could no longer carry. But what nobody there understood was the real reason behind those tears. They believed it was only another difficult day. They had no idea that every emotion pouring out was connected to you. Stay with this message until the end, because the next revelation changes everything you thought you knew. There is another truth that has remained hidden until this very moment. Long before that unexpected breakdown happened, invisible moments were already preparing the way. Every time your name appeared inside their thoughts, they tried to push it away. Every memory returned stronger than before. Every attempt to forget only reminded them how deeply your presence had settled inside their heart. They smiled in front of others while carrying questions nobody could answer. They laughed during conversations while quietly wondering whether another chance would ever exist. Then came the moment nobody expected. A simple conversation turned into complete silence. Their neighbors noticed the change immediately. The confidence disappeared from their face. Their voice became unsteady. Their eyes filled with emotions they had been hiding for far too long. They could no longer pretend everything was fine. The mask finally fell away. Yet the biggest surprise was still waiting. Because after everything happened, one unexpected sentence was spoken. It was a sentence that shocked everyone standing nearby. No one knew who they were talking about, but deep inside, those words carried only one name. The name they were unable to erase from their heart. Listen carefully, because this next part carries a message that few people ever recognize in time. Sometimes life becomes completely quiet before revealing something unforgettable. You may think distance means everything has ended. You may believe silence means someone no longer cares. But silence often hides battles that nobody else can see. While you questioned your own path, another person was questioning every decision they had ever made. Regret has a strange way of arriving when the heart finally understands what it almost lost. That realization became impossible for them to escape. Every ordinary place started reminding them of extraordinary memories. Every familiar road carried a reminder of moments they wished they could relive. Even the smallest things began speaking louder than words. Their neighbors noticed these changes without understanding the deeper reason. They wondered why someone who looked perfectly fine yesterday suddenly seemed overwhelmed today. They could only witness the outside. They could never see the storm taking place within. And what happened immediately afterward became the turning point nobody expected. Something remarkable followed that emotional moment. Instead of running away from those feelings again, they finally stopped resisting them. For the first time in a very long while, they admitted to themselves that pretending had become more painful than accepting the truth. That realization did not arrive through logic. It arrived through the weight of every memory they had buried. Every unfinished conversation returned. Every missed opportunity replayed inside their mind. Every moment they believed could be forgotten suddenly stood right before them again. The neighbors who watched from a distance could only see someone becoming emotional. They never realized they were witnessing the ending of one chapter and the beginning of another. Because once a heart reaches its breaking point, it often becomes ready to rebuild in a completely different way. That hidden transformation has already begun. The question is no longer whether feelings still exist. The real question is what those feelings are preparing to change next. The answer is much closer than anyone realizes. Before this moment passes, there is one final truth you must hear. Not every emotional breakdown is a sign of weakness. Sometimes it is the beginning of honesty. Sometimes it is the first moment a person finally stops fighting against what their own heart has been trying to say all along. The scene that unfolded in front of their neighbors was never meant to embarrass them. It became the moment that exposed everything they had tried to hide from themselves. They walked away carrying more clarity than confusion. They left with fewer excuses than before. They discovered that running from emotions only makes those emotions stronger. Meanwhile, you have been standing at the edge of a story that is only beginning to reveal itself. What happened that day was not the ending. It was the first sign that something much greater has quietly started moving beneath the surface. And what unfolds next will reveal a secret that changes the meaning of every moment that came before. A quiet shift had already begun before anyone realized it. The moment they walked away from that unexpected scene, nothing around them looked different, yet everything inside them had changed. The streets were the same. The sky was the same. The familiar voices around them remained unchanged. But their heart refused to return to the version of itself that had existed only hours before. Every step felt heavier because every memory had become impossible to silence. They replayed countless moments in their mind, searching for the exact point where everything started slipping away. The answers never came easily. Instead, each memory opened another unanswered question. Why did they wait so long to understand your value? Why did they believe time would always remain on their side? Why did they think feelings could simply disappear if ignored long enough? Those questions echoed louder than any conversation around them. Even when people tried speaking to them, their attention drifted somewhere else. Their eyes were looking ahead, but their heart kept returning to you. That silent battle became stronger with every passing hour. Yet this was only the beginning. Because something completely unexpected was about to happen before the day reached its end. As the evening settled in, an ordinary conversation suddenly turned into something unforgettable. Someone casually mentioned moving on. Another person spoke about letting the past stay behind. Everyone expected them to agree without hesitation. Instead, complete silence filled the air. That silence lasted only a few seconds, but it felt endless to everyone watching. Then came a response nobody expected. Their voice carried honesty instead of certainty. They admitted that some people never truly leave your heart, no matter how much time passes. The room became unusually quiet. Nobody knew the full story hidden behind those words. Nobody understood that every sentence was connected to memories they had spent so long trying to escape. The neighbors who had witnessed the earlier breakdown suddenly understood that it had never been about one difficult day. It was something much deeper. Something that had been growing quietly for a very long time. They could sense the sincerity without knowing its destination. But one truth remained hidden from everyone except the heart carrying it. Every emotion, every regret, every realization pointed toward the same person. Toward the one they could never truly forget. There was another sign that almost everyone overlooked. During the following days, they began noticing reminders of you in places where they had never appeared before. A familiar melody. A simple phrase. A passing conversation. A place they had not visited in months. None of these moments were extraordinary on their own. Yet together they created something impossible to ignore. Each reminder gently pulled another memory back into the light. Instead of resisting those memories, they allowed themselves to feel them completely. For the first time, they stopped blaming circumstances and started looking honestly at their own choices. That quiet reflection became more powerful than any dramatic conversation ever could. It revealed truths they had hidden even from themselves. They finally understood that some connections cannot be measured by distance or silence. They are measured by the way the heart refuses to let go, even after every distraction has failed. This realization brought both peace and sadness at the same time. Peace because the truth had finally been accepted. Sadness because they realized how much time had already been lost. Yet destiny has an unusual way of working. Sometimes the longest delay prepares the most meaningful moment. Then another unexpected event unfolded. Someone close to them asked a simple question that sounded ordinary on the surface. If you had one chance to change a single decision, what would it be? The answer arrived instantly, without hesitation. They did not need time to think. They did not search for perfect words. Their heart answered before their mind could interfere. Everyone listening noticed the certainty in their voice. It was not the certainty of someone who knew every answer. It was the certainty of someone who had finally stopped hiding from the truth. In that single moment, years of confusion seemed to disappear. The weight they had been carrying no longer remained invisible. It became clear that the greatest struggle had never been with circumstances. The greatest struggle had always been within themselves. Once that realization surfaced, there was no returning to the old version of who they had been. A different chapter had quietly begun. One filled not with denial, but with courage. One filled not with excuses, but with honesty. And that chapter was leading toward something nobody could yet predict. Now the story reaches a point where every detail begins connecting. The breakdown that happened in front of their neighbors was never an isolated moment. It was the first visible crack in a wall that had been weakening for a very long time. Every hidden emotion. Every unanswered question. Every silent memory had been building toward that single moment. Once the wall collapsed, nothing could remain concealed. The truth had finally stepped into the light. But the greatest revelation has still not appeared. There is one decision waiting ahead that will redefine everything that has happened so far. It is a decision that cannot be delayed forever. It cannot be hidden behind pride. It cannot be buried beneath silence. The closer that moment comes, the stronger their heart becomes. They are beginning to understand that some opportunities are too valuable to leave unanswered. And when the next chapter begins, it will reveal why every unexpected event was quietly leading toward one unforgettable turning point. Everything became even more unusual after that day. They tried convincing themselves that life would eventually return to normal, but normal no longer existed. Every morning began with determination to move forward, yet every evening ended with the same unanswered thoughts. The harder they tried to silence their heart, the louder it spoke. Small moments started carrying unexpected meaning. A familiar road reminded them of a forgotten conversation. A passing smile reminded them of a memory they believed had disappeared forever. Even ordinary days refused to stay ordinary anymore. It was as if life itself kept placing quiet reminders in front of them, asking the same question again and again. What happens when someone realizes the most valuable connection was never fully appreciated? That question stayed with them wherever they went. The neighbors who had witnessed their emotional moment noticed another change. Their expression had become calmer, yet much deeper. They were no longer pretending everything was perfect. They had stopped hiding behind confidence that never truly existed. Something inside them had awakened, and once that awakening began, it refused to fade away. But what happened next became the most surprising moment yet. An unexpected conversation arrived without warning. Someone mentioned your name in the most ordinary way, never realizing how powerful those few words would become. The room fell completely quiet. Their heartbeats seemed louder than every sound around them. They looked away for a moment, not because they wanted to avoid the subject, but because every memory returned at once. The people around them noticed the silence but misunderstood its meaning. They thought it was simple surprise. They never realized it was the weight of countless emotions finally reaching the surface. Then, without planning it, they smiled. It was not the smile of someone who had forgotten the past. It was the smile of someone who had finally accepted what their heart had been trying to reveal all along. In that instant, fear began losing its power. Regret began transforming into determination. The person who once believed everything had ended quietly started believing that not every unfinished story is truly over. Sometimes the longest silence prepares the strongest return. That single realization changed the direction of every thought they carried from that moment onward. As the days continued, another remarkable pattern appeared. They stopped asking themselves whether they still cared. That answer had already become obvious. Instead, they began asking a completely different question. What if this story was never about losing someone? What if it was about becoming the person they should have been from the very beginning? That thought remained with them day and night. It influenced every decision. It reshaped every conversation. They became more patient, more thoughtful, more honest with themselves than ever before. The neighbors who had once seen only tears now noticed quiet confidence replacing confusion. They could not explain where that change came from. They only knew something inside had transformed. But there was one detail nobody else could see. Deep within their heart, your place had never been replaced. Time had changed many things, but it had never changed that truth. Every lesson they learned seemed to point back to the same realization. Some connections are not forgotten because they were never meant to disappear. They remain alive, quietly waiting for the moment when both hearts finally understand their true value. Then came a moment that felt almost impossible to ignore. Late in the evening, surrounded by complete silence, they paused everything they were doing and allowed themselves one honest reflection. They imagined what they would say if they had one genuine opportunity to speak from the heart without fear, without pride, and without hesitation. They realized the words they had searched for during countless sleepless nights were finally clear. There was no longer any need for excuses. No need to explain every mistake. The heart does not always need perfect sentences. Sometimes it only needs complete honesty. That realization brought unexpected peace. The burden they had carried for so long became lighter, not because every problem had disappeared, but because they finally stopped running from the truth. For the first time in a very long while, hope quietly replaced uncertainty. And that hope became stronger with every passing day. Something unseen was moving every piece of this story toward a destination that neither time nor distance had been able to erase. Now another chapter quietly begins to unfold. The emotional moment in front of their neighbors was never the greatest revelation. It was only the first visible sign that a much deeper transformation had already started. Every tear carried meaning. Every silence carried a message. Every unexpected memory became another step toward understanding what truly mattered. They no longer measured life by what had been lost. They began measuring it by what could still be restored. That single change in perspective altered everything. Their heart became steadier. Their thoughts became clearer. Their purpose became stronger than ever before. Yet the greatest surprise remains just ahead. There is one final realization waiting for them, and when it arrives, every unanswered question from the beginning of this journey will suddenly make perfect sense. The story is moving toward a moment that neither coincidence nor chance can explain, and that moment is closer than anyone believes.